bought with the public money and bound by law to satisfy the demands of all who visited them. They were in fact public servants, and their wretched gains were a legitimate source of revenue to the state. Prostitution became a monopoly, and so profitable that, even in Solomon's lifetime, a superb temple dedicated to Venus the courtesan was built out of the funds accruing from the source. This describes what is known to be history's first brothel in ancient Greece, proving prostitution is almost as ancient as civilization itself. Growing up in a city where prostitution is very much legal, I've always been unfazed by the idea of it, but I first became very interested in this topic whilst binge watching a show on Netflix called Seduction. It's a fictionalized show that tells the tale of a group of prostitutes in a high-class brothel in Sydney. They own houses, they raise children, and they make all of their money legally from having sex with men. The first issue that the criminalization of prostitution causes is the violence that prostitutes face from both customers and pimps, and the fact that they're often too afraid to go to law enforcement for fear of either imprisonment or not being taken seriously. According to Business Insider, a study of San Francisco prostitutes found that 82% had been assaulted in their career, and 68% had been raped. Additionally, a Colorado study found that prostitutes were 18 times more likely to be murdered than other non-prostitutes of their same age and race. The issue at hand is not just the violence against sex workers, but of course their unwillingness to contact law enforcement. Considering the fact that prostitution is at its core a victimless crime, why is it that sex workers themselves are persecuted more heavily than customers and pimps? Every year in the US, between 70,000 and 80,000 people are arrested for prostitution crimes, costing taxpayers $200 million. Out of these arrests, 70% were female prostitutes and madams, whilst only 20% were male prostitutes or pimps. Only 10% of these were johns. The criminalization of prostitution only means further victimization of women. The next issue that we face with the criminalization of prostitution is the fact that most prostitutes have very limited access to health care. They often don't have health care plans or any way to pay, and they have a lot less incentive to use protection. According to the Center for Disease Control, sex workers may not use condoms consistently for a variety of reasons, including economics, partner type, power dynamics. For example, sex workers may receive more money for unprotected vaginal and anal sex. Other than not having easy access to prophylactics and the incentives of higher pay, there is also a huge link between prostitution and alcohol and drug abuse. Sex workers may have impaired judgment from this, and therefore are less likely to negotiate into using protection. Many sex workers that do exchange sex for drugs often have more clients, use less protection, and are more likely to share needles for intravenous drug use. Many sex workers are unaware that they are carrying diseases, and they're usually hesitant to get tested because of accessibility, impairment from drugs and alcohol, mental illness, or the general stigma regarding their work. One of the biggest reasons for legalizing prostitution is the strain that it puts on law enforcement resources. According to Ronald Weitzer, in Prostitution Control in America, Rethinking Public Policy, a study of the country's 16 largest cities found that they spent a total of $120 million in 1985 to enforce prostitution laws. A San Francisco Crime Committee concluded in 1971 that spending on prostitution was by essentially nothing of a positive nature. And Atlanta's task force on prostitution concluded that the spending was a waste and that burdened the courts and lowered police morale. Regarding the case of former New York Governor Eliot Spitzer, Alan Dershowitz wrote in the Wall Street Journal, "In this case, they wiretapped 5,000 phone conversations, intercepted 6,000 emails, used surveillance and undercover tactics that are more appropriate for trapping terrorists than in trapping Johns." He went on to say, Every hour spent going after prostitution is an hour that could have been spent going after terrorists and going after people who victimize. The only issue isn't the amount of money being spent on prostitution control, but also the potential income and sales tax that the government isn't receiving. So, I know by now you're all probably thinking, maybe it's not so bad. And in the words of my 10th grade English teacher, legalize it, regulate it, and tax the hell out of it. What I propose is legalizing brothels and private escort services, whilst cracking down on street prostitution, underage sex workers, and sex trafficking. Working in a legally run brothel is much safer for women than working on the streets. They have other people to back them up. If they need to, they're able to contact law enforcement without fear of being imprisoned. According to Business Insider, brothel owners have a clear interest in maintaining their image as a law-abiding, trouble-free business to keep their licenses and maintain good relationships with their communities. The same article mentions a study at the University of Nevada that concluded brothels offer the safest environment available for women to sell consensual sex acts for money. The health pros of legalizing prostitution means a lower rate of STDs and higher health standards. Having sex workers registered with the state means they have to take a monthly STD test along with using condoms for every single client. This is a very easy way to regulate sexual health and to separate the safe and legal prostitutes from the non-compliant ones. In a Men's Health article entitled "Prostitute Tells All Inside the Bedroom of a U.S. Brothel," sex worker Lydia tells an account of her regular week working in the Nevada brothel she calls home. She describes the monthly STD tests required by the state of Nevada, as well as what they call in the industry a dick check, where the woman does a quick visual inspection to assure there are no obvious signs of disease. In the state of Nevada, all prostitutes operating in brothels must have monthly tests and use condoms. And in fact, in a 2011 report, they stated that adult film stars in California have a significantly higher rate of gonorrhea and chlamydia than prostitutes in Nevada. So now that all the police resources aren't being used on legal prostitution, we can target the real issue, which is sex trafficking, which is actually growing in the U.S. every single year. According to the National Human Trafficking Resource Center, in 2014, there were over 21,000 phone calls, 1,100 emails, and 1,400 online tips regarding human trafficking. 90% of these cases were women, and unfortunately, 36% were minors. Law enforcement resources would go to much better use for this issue, I think. Finally, the fun part for the government, income tax. Currently, Nevada is the only state where prostitution is legal, and they don't have a state income tax, although legal sex workers are still required to submit a tax form and pay federal income tax. The average Nevada brothel prostitute that works 1 week a month can earn upwards of $100,000 a year, leading to $20,000 in income tax. So just imagine if every single sex worker in the U.S. had to submit this and pay this tax. At this point, I imagine a lot of you are really now starting to see the pros of legalizing prostitution. Prostitution, it truly is ingrained in our society and has been since ancient Greece, if not earlier. So what you can do to push this issue forward is talk to your governor, your senator, your city council, send letters, make your voice heard. Unfortunately, it's been pushed to the back burner in terms of larger politics. A lot of the presidential candidates aren't really speaking about it. They're focusing more on other issues like pornography, gay rights, et cetera, et cetera. So if everyone paid a little more attention and opened their minds, we could truly change the lives of a lot of people and prevent a lot of women from being